We got down to verse 11, if you remember, in 1 Corinthians chapter 11. So we'll begin there just quick so I can get these glasses fixed to where I can see. There we go. Verse 11. Nevertheless, neither is man independent of woman, nor woman independent of man in the Lord. Let's go ahead and read 12 as we go for that. For as woman came from man, even so man also comes through woman. But all things are from God. What's that telling us there, especially in verse 11? Neither is man independent of woman, or is woman independent of man. And how has God set the marriage laws up? They become one, don't they?
You would really call the woman a helpmate.
And she is the helpmate for the man. Helpmeet, but a helpmate, we understand that. So this is the way God has ordained marriage, isn't it? You know, the man and woman come together, as you said, they become one. They begin a new family. And are there anything that can separate that? Death. The marriage. What is it?
Death.
Death. That's the only thing that would be. There's one other thing that'll sever that marriage tie too. What would that be? Adultery, unfaithfulness. And if you have been around anybody that has been divorced, the innocent party, it is very, very bad on them. I know that from experience that I had. My brother, it can just almost run somebody when they think that much of, your wife, and then something happens that they're not faithful. It can just turn your whole life upside down. So God says, though, nevertheless, man is independent of them. In other words, we've got to have them. The man needs the woman, and the woman needs the man. And even we go down in verse 12, said, woman came from man. Now, where do we find that in Genesis? What does it tell that how woman got here, how she became a rib? She came from man. A rib from the man is how, and as Carrie said, God seen it wasn't good for man to be alone, so He made him a partner, something that's compatible to him. So that's the thought of it here is when we come through here. So let's look at this, and it also says that I looked up some other things around, and it says the subordination of man to Christ and to woman is not inconsistent with personal equality. So now think about that. The dependence is mutual, for as woman was created for man, so man is born of woman, both alike in their mutual relations, but in different roles in life, and are dependent on God. In other words, both of them, they're dependent on each other, but both of them is dependent on God. Therefore, that does not mean that one's inferior to the other. Honor belongs to each in the God-given roles. Now, we know that man is over woman. Now, does man rule over woman, lord over her, and treat her like she's a second-class citizen?
No.
We had not ought to, had we? What is man supposed to do? Treats the church. In other words, he should love her. He should want what's best for her. He should want to. Now listen to this. Now he should want to sacrifice for his wife, for her well-being, especially for her spiritual well-being. So we see the honor belongs to those in their God-given roles. Now, I don't think we better talk about that. We'd get in trouble, wouldn't we? No, I'm just kidding. I was going to say about how mean women was what I was going to say, Carrie.
You're not wrong.
Just kidding. But now that does work both ways, don't it, Leon? The women supposed to love their husband and be in submission to him. Now I can't remember that one of the commentaries I read said if the man loved the woman enough and took care of her in such a way, she'd be submissive to him. She would want what's best for him. And she would sacrifice for him.
Ephesians 5:22 talks 33 talks about marriage, Christ and the church. It talks about woman's supposed to be submissive to the husband, but the husband is supposed to love his wife as Christ loves
The church. Yeah, now we can go over there and read that whole thing, and that tells us a lot about the marriage, doesn't it? In Ephesians chapter 5, of course it does. All right, now let's look on down to verse 13. Now we have to keep in mind on this verse. Now we're thinking about the culture that was in Corinth at that time. Now Brandon said some things last time we was here about the head covering of woman. Sometimes that means that they was married. And when we get down here to another place or two, there's two words, veil, that is translated. One of them is a head covering and the other one is a veil. So when we get to that, if we get to it tonight, we will look at such things there. But all right, now he says, judge among yourselves, is it proper for a woman to pray to God with her head uncovered? Like I say, we have to remember the culture there at that time. Now we talked some about last time about how in that culture the women did wear the veils. And why did they do that? To show that they was, you remember what?
That they belonged to their man and that they were in subjection to him.
You could be married and they were subjection to their husband, and when they did that, they did not bring dishonor to their head. And who is the head of woman? Man. Who's the head of man? Who's the head of Christ? God is. So and we talked about that. That's just the order it is. God said this is the way it's going to be. And is it up to us to change that? Well, absolutely not, is it? God made the order, and he said that for why? That's the way it's going to be the best. That's the way it's going to be the best for all. So judge among yourselves. In this culture, they know if it's going to be judged accordingly. They know that this is the way they live at that time. They know that if the woman's head was uncovered, she would be married, and she brought honor to her husband by doing that. And another thing too, when it comes to the marriage part, that the woman wore the veil in public and everywhere, what would signify, now that showed that she is married now today, in today's world. What would a woman wear to signify that she was married? The old ring over there, wouldn't it? Now, see, now that'll help us kind of understand a little bit better now of what the veil meant at that time. So, of course, they could wear a veil here and it wouldn't make any difference to us, would it? Because it's not our culture, if that's the way it is. But that ring, that is our culture, isn't it? And I ain't got mine on.
Oh, later.
But see, that's something that we can compare to with that ring and with the veil they've got. So it says, judge among yourselves. Now verse 14 says, does not even nature itself teach you that if a man has long hair, it's a dishonor to him? In verse 15, but if a woman has long hair, it is her glory to her, for her hair is given to her for a covering. Now the nature referred to that which is inborn by instinct. Now there's two ways that this word nature is translated out of the Greek. One of them is that according to the regular laws and order of nature, and also the other in a sense of the word is also used to describe that which was from birth. So I think the better one for us that we would look at would be the natural sense of what is right and wrong. At that time, the culture in Corinth, if you went with your head uncovered or shaved, it would be wrong. Now, why would it be wrong if the woman's head was shaved? What happened in the temples? They thought, yeah, they was prostitutes, and that's how they knew them. You know, when they went outside and they seen the woman with real short hair or shaven hair, there's a prostitute. From the temple of Aphrodite, if I'm correct on that, which I think I am. But anyway, that's what would be wrong, wouldn't it? For a member of the church to have their hair like that, unless there was something wrong. You know, there's women that gets bald-headed. They have diseases that their hair falls out. And today we would just think that probably they had cancer, as you said last time. And I'm not saying all of them do, but most of them will wear a scarf or something on their head then. So, you know, it's culture, what it is at that time. And I think that's where a lot of people get messed up with this, saying that a woman has to have long hair and men has to have real short hair. Of course, for most of us men, we ain't got much hair left anymore. But the point of it is, when it comes to all that, when it says in verse 14 and 15, that nature teaches a man that's a dishonor, does not even nature itself teach you that a man has long hair? It is a dishonor to him. But if a woman has long hair, it is her glory, for her hair is given to her for a covering. Now let's go to 16. Now with all this said, when it comes to this, now I want you to listen to what Paul says now. If anyone seems to be contentious, we have no such customs, nor do the churches of God. What is contentious? What would that be?
Disagreeable.
All right, disagreeable, or somebody that
Looking to make a fight out of.
yeah, something that they would they're just not a good person. They're going to try to stir up trouble at all time of anything that comes on. So here we see now, if anyone seems to be contentious, we have no such custom, or do the churches. It says the word custom comes from the Greek word, which means of course, a custom or customary usage. So now that goes back with having the long hair and the short hair, and the veil and the covering for the woman, whichever one it would be. I would like to go back just a little bit to on verse 15 again, before we go on through the next one. But it says a woman's long hair is a glory to her. Long or short are relative terms, especially in this day and time, isn't it? Can a woman have short hair and still look like a woman?
Yes.
Absolutely, they can't it? Now, in our culture especially, isn't it? In the Western Hemisphere culture, would there be something wrong then if your hair was plumb down to your waist?
No.
Would it be so bad if a man's hair was plumb down to his waist? Think about that for a minute. Is a man supposed to look like a man, Ray?
Yes.
Have you ever looked at somebody from the back and think, "Ooh, boy, I don't know whether that's a boy or a girl"?
I've done that at school before.
I have too, several times. It's culture though, isn't it? To us, members of the Lord's church, are we going to let our hair get that long since we know what the Bible says on such a thing? We're not going to, are we? Why would we not do that? Who would we bring dishonor to?
If there was a mistake in identifying us, it would bring dishonor to God.
We dishonor not only, we dishonor Christ if we go with what we've talked about here, woman, man, Christ, and God. And if you dishonor God, you can't keep from dishonoring. If you dishonor Christ, you can't keep from dishonoring God, because can you separate Christ and God? Can't do it, can you? Can you separate the Holy Spirit from it? Still can't, can you? So there's one, but three identities in it. So we cannot separate them. They're all one. So if we dress in such a way that it brings dishonor to our head, a member of the church had not ought to do that. And the same way with the women. Now what are men supposed to look like men and women supposed to look like women? Now, what about the dress? How we dress. Does that tell anything about our spiritual life? Let's say that. Sure does, don't it? It sure does.
You know, in other cultures, like 200 years ago, the Native Americans here, you know, a lot of them had long hair. But they also had ornaments that identified them.
Yeah, and I was going to say that they had something that identified the man from the woman, didn't they? And Leon, that was culture back then too, wasn't it? That was the way it was. That's the Indians had long hair, wasn't it? And both of them, the man and the woman. But like you said, they had something that would distinguish them from one another. Well, that's a very good point. Very good point. Another with culture. A woman wouldn't wear, or a man wouldn't wear a dress here in the United States. Well, let's say a member of the Lord's church would not wear a dress to worship service, wouldn't it? Why? Because what would we be dressing as? We'd be dressing as a woman, wouldn't we? We'd be dressing as the female type, let's say. And so we can't do that. Because that's even in our culture, isn't it, today? That would be wrong. And over in when I went to Christmas Island, now the men and women dressed almost alike. They had a wrap around, but still you could tell the difference from the men and the women because most of them's hair was short. And you know, in their culture at that time, when you sat down and you sat on the floor over there, very, very few chairs you seen, and you sat down on the floor and you didn't sit with your legs crossed or one leg up or one down, of course now, but you sat and you had your legs together pointed right away from you. And if you didn't do that, that was an insult to that group of people that we was around. So they told us when we went, be sure that you sat in such a way that it doesn't, bring dishonor to them. That it was wrong for us to sit in any other way. So it was in their culture, so we should respect their culture, hadn't we? And that's the same way we're talking about here. Paul's saying, respect the culture where you're at here in Corinth. Okay, so a woman is her long hair is glory to her, of course, and I've always said, long or short, it's her glory in our day and time now. The only thing that women should dress in a manner that no one would question them whether she was a man. Women should look like women and men like men. Now this is in verse 15, then back, I think it's in verse 4 or 6 or something, is those words that's translated out of Greek, one for hair and the other for covering, another is the veil. Let's see, and it says one here denotes something that was thrown around. In other words, it was a veil where they put it on their head and throwed it around. And in the other, it comes from that her hair was the covering, because it tells us that. And it was translated hair in that verse. Now we looked at verse 16. So we've seen that the contentious person is one who causes trouble. The principle applies today in whatever society we live. Christians are to conform to seemingly fitting conduct of the society in which they live, so long as those customs are modest or sinful. So that's like when if we go somewhere and we abide by their customs. We can do that as long as it's not sinful or immoral for us to do it. And that was the way in Christmas Island. They was covered up and dressed well, even the little kids. And the one thing I remember about those little kids is they smell like coconut oil. And that's something that just burnt in my brain, because every one of them I'd hold, you had to keep pretty good hold of them because they're pretty slick. You know, they'd put that oil on them babies. And but that was one thing that I remember, and the other one was to be sure and sit and not offend them the way you sit down.
Well, it's like the cultures that don't like you to wear your shoes inside.
There you go.
They have places for them at the door. You take your shoes off and walk in.
Yeah, and if you don't, you offend them.
Yeah, you're disrespecting.
You offend them. So that it's culture. What he's talking about here, when we look at all this, it's culture. How they're done it there. Don't do things that would upset them. Because if this contentious man, he's going to cause trouble if you do anything. So that'd be, it's all right. If Paul was talking about liberty, all these other times up through here, he would have the liberty to go in and cut his hair or do whatever he wanted to. But he wouldn't do that because why? Cause his brother or someone to stumble there, or cause that contentious man to say something about it to cause trouble. Now, if you got anything else, what we're going to do is we're just going to go just a little bit, go over the whole thing just a little bit more before time's up, which is getting pretty quick, just to help us maybe put this in our mind a little bit better, so if we ever have to teach somebody on this account about the hair coverings and what it really means and things. So let's just have a little review before we go on. Brother Harkrider says the underlying principle of 1 Corinthians chapter 11, verses 2 through 16, was that of submission to authority. Now we looked at that pretty close, if you remember. The principle continues to be necessary and must be applied in various cultures. For example, if the wearing of a certain color of dress signified infidelity, a godly woman would refuse to wear that color of dress. But in most Western cultures, that's talking about us, the wearing of a veil does not signify to the world that a woman is in subjection to her husband. Therefore, this practice is not required of women in such places, which we understand, or I understand it better than what I had. Also, another one of the commentaries that I'd read, it says it addresses the divine order, the authority, and the modesty. Of course, now we're talking about the modesty, which goes to the woman and the way she dresses, the way she has her hair and things. Not only that, but with the Corinthian worship there, that men and women are interdependent, as we talked about a while ago. We need each other. We are equal in value in God's eyes. One is not better than the other. In verse 3 back over there, it says the headship order. It was God, Christ, man, and woman. Something we always want to remember. Keep that in your mind. God, Christ, man, and woman. That's something that we always need to understand and keep in mind. We should know our place. God set it up this way, and it's not up for us to change it. Now, this is a spiritual hierarchy of responsibility. Voluntary submission, it's in the chain of command. It is a divine order. First century Corinth, the woman's head covering signified modesty, respect for her husband, recognition of the established God-given order. removing or shaving their covering was considered shameful, dishonor to her head, which is man, then of course to God also. Man should not cover his head. He dishonors his head. He dishonors Christ. Now, one other reason that I'd come up that I found I thought was a very interesting note on this part. Now, we got to remember, now they've come out of pagan worship about all the church, Corinthian church members there. So Paul has taught them, they've obeyed the gospel. We can go back in 2 Corinthians chapter 6, verse 2, and you know, says, as such were some of you. So they've come out of this temple worship of these pagan gods. And it said there that the pagan priest, they would cover their head. They would take their whatever they had on, they'd cover their head when they prayed and sacrificed to them false gods. So now that helps us understand, or it does me a little bit better, about Paul saying, don't, men, as you said last time about respect, when we come in this building, what do we do? If we've got a hat on, we take it off. We do that, as Leon said, we do that out of respect for the Lord. So that's something else that we can think about. That these men don't go in and have their head covered in the church services and pray or out in the public, because that comes from the pagan worship. And there you have those maybe weaker brothers say, look, he's praying just like the temple priests do from there. So, and what would that do? What does Paul say? Don't do that, cause why? Hurts the conscience of maybe a weaker brother, don't it? So that's another part of it. And we come to the end of it, it's just that man is to look like a man and a woman to look like a woman. A husband and wife relationship should reflect God, Christ, and the relationship with reference to the authority and submission. A woman wearing a head covering indicated that she was married, once again, and also in our culture, a ring would signify that now, as it would at that time with the veil. Dress in culturally appropriate way when the church assembles. And when it's not assembled, we are to dress in such a way that we're modest dressed. We must recognize that God has designed men and women to relate to each other in different ways. God's design for husbands and wives, they are equal, but with different roles. So you young couples, you remember that. God's design for husband and wives, they are equal, but they have different roles. Now, it's about time for us to quit. Has anybody got anything else on this that would I need to get wrote down so if I ever teach this class somewhere again? George, have you got anything to add to any of this about the head coverings or the man of praying or anything that we went over?
Well, it's just amazing how far our society has got away from this, though, isn't it?
From being modest, ain't it?
Well, all of it.
Well, yeah, true. That, I mean, the whole shooting match, it is. It's
disregarded altogether.
It has. Yeah, they have. Ain't that's something. That sure is. Thomas, you got anything to add? Baylor, anything that you want to add or something about it, anything? Ray? Colton, what you got? You ain't got nothing. Well, Brandon, I left you for last. Best for last.
He knows better.
Brethren, thank you. I appreciate your comments and everything and your kind attention. So we'll finish up. Well, probably won't finish it, but Sunday morning we'll start on verse 17 of chapter 11. Of course, we'll get into the Lord's Supper then. We can see what kind of question that they had asked Paul, can't we, when it comes to the Lord's Supper. And like I say, always keep that in mind too. All we're getting is the answers on these. We ain't getting the questions. And sometimes they're pretty hard to answer because we don't know what everything that was said.